The rain poured down like bullets on the dark parking garage as CEO Benjamin Alexander rushed toward his silver BMW. His hands shook as he fumbled with his car keys, his mind spinning with the devastating news he had just received. The company he had built from nothing was about to collapse. His wife had filed for divorce that morning, and the bank was threatening to take everything he owned. As he reached for the car door handle, a voice cut through the storm like thunder. "Sir, don't get in that car," shouted Jerome Washington, the 28-year-old janitor who worked nights in the building. Benjamin turned around, his eyes red with tears and anger, ready to snap at anyone who dared interrupt his escape from this nightmare. But something in Jerome's voice made him freeze. Something urgent, something desperate, something that would change both their lives forever. Benjamin had never really noticed Jerome before tonight, even though the young man had been cleaning the executive floors for over 2 years. To Benjamin, janitors were invisible people who emptied trash cans and mopped floors while he was busy making million-dollar deals. Jerome was just another face in the background, another person whose name he never bothered to learn. But tonight was different. Tonight, Benjamin was broken, defeated, and ready to drive away from everything he had ever known. His pharmaceutical company, TechMed Industries, was facing lawsuits worth hundreds of millions after their new heart medication caused serious side effects in patients. The FDA was investigating, investors were pulling out, and employees were losing their jobs. Benjamin felt like a failure, like a man who had destroyed everything he touched. "What do you want?" Benjamin screamed at Jerome, rain soaking through his expensive suit. "Can't you see I'm having the worst day of my life? Just leave me alone." Jerome stepped closer, his janitor uniform drenched but his eyes filled with determination. "Mr. Alexander, I know you don't know me, but I've been watching you for months. You've been working 18-hour days, you look sick, and tonight you look like a man who's given up hope." Benjamin laughed bitterly. "Hope? You want to talk about hope? My company is dying, my marriage is over, and I'm about to lose everything I've worked for. What could you possibly know about my problems?" Jerome took a deep breath. "I know more than you think, sir. And I know that getting in that car right now would be the biggest mistake of your life." Something in Jerome's tone made Benjamin pause. The young man's voice wasn't just concerned, it was knowing. Like he understood something Benjamin didn't. "Why shouldn't I get in my car?" Benjamin asked, his anger turning to confusion. Jerome walked around to the driver's side and pointed at the front tire. "Because 20 minutes ago, I saw 3 men messing with your car. They loosened your brake lines and cut a hole in your front tire. If you drive this car tonight, especially in this storm, you won't make it out of the parking garage alive." Benjamin felt his blood turn cold. "What are you talking about? Who would want to hurt me?" Jerome's expression grew serious. "The same people who have been sending you those threatening letters for the past month. The families of patients who got sick from your company's medication. They blame you personally for what happened to their loved ones." Benjamin staggered backward, his mind reeling. He had received angry letters, but he thought they were just emotional outbursts from grieving families. He never imagined anyone would actually try to hurt him physically. "How do you know about the letters?" Benjamin asked. "I empty your trash can every night, Mr. Alexander. I've seen dozens of those letters. I've also seen you staying late, reading medical reports, trying to figure out what went wrong with your medication. I know you're not the evil man those families think you are." Jerome pulled out a small flashlight and shone it under the car. Sure enough, brake fluid was dripping onto the concrete floor. "I called the police 20 minutes ago. They should be here soon. But Mr. Alexander, there's something else you need to know. Something that might change how you see this whole situation." Benjamin was shaking now, not from the cold rain, but from the realization that someone had actually tried to kill him. "What else?" he whispered. Jerome looked him straight in the eyes. My little sister Kaisha was one of the patients who took your company's heart medication. She's 8 years old and was born with a heart defect. Your medication was supposed to help her, but instead it made her sicker. She's been in the hospital for 3 months, and the doctors say she might not make it. Benjamin felt like he had been punched in the stomach. This young man, who had just saved his life, was personally affected by his company's failure. "I'm so sorry," Benjamin said, tears mixing with rainwater on his face. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt." "We thought the medication was safe," Jerome nodded slowly. "I know you didn't mean it, Mr. Alexander. That's why I couldn't let those angry men hurt you tonight. See, I've been watching you these past few months. I've seen you crying at your desk when you thought no one was looking. I've seen you reading every single medical report about the patients who got sick. I've seen you trying to find answers, trying to fix what went wrong. Most CEOs would just hide behind lawyers and PR people, but you're different. You actually care about the people who got hurt." Benjamin was amazed. This janitor had seen more of his true character than his own wife had. "But why would you help me? Your sister is sick because of my company. You should hate me." Jerome smiled sadly. "Hate won't make my sister better. But maybe you can." Police sirens echoed through the parking garage as 3 squad cars pulled up. Officers jumped out and immediately began examining Benjamin's car, while others spread out to search for the suspects. Detective Sarah Chun approached Benjamin and Jerome. "Mr. Alexander, we got the call about the threat to your life. Can you tell us what happened?" Benjamin looked at Jerome with new respect. "This man saved my life. If he hadn't stopped me from getting in my car, I would probably be dead right now." The detective took their statements while crime scene. Technicians photographed the damaged brake lines and tire. Within an hour, police had arrested 3 men hiding in a van across the street. They were family members of patients who had been hurt by TechMed's medication, driven to desperation by their loved ones suffering and medical bills they couldn't pay. As the police finished their investigation, Benjamin and Jerome found themselves alone in the parking garage again. The rain had stopped, and the first hints of dawn were appearing in the sky. "Jerome, I need to ask you something," Benjamin said. "You saved my life tonight, but I get the feeling there's more you want to tell me." Jerome looked nervous but determined. "Mr. Alexander, I didn't just save you because it was the right thing to do. I saved you because I believe you're the only person who can help my sister and all the other patients who got sick. You see, I'm not just a janitor. I have a college degree in biochemistry from Howard University. I've been working nights and weekends to pay for my sister's medical care, but in my spare time, I've been studying your company's medication. I think I know what went wrong, and more importantly, I think I know how to fix it." Benjamin was stunned. "You have a degree in biochemistry? What are you doing working as a janitor?" Jerome's expression grew sad. "Same reason a lot of smart people work jobs they're overqualified for. I needed money fast when Keisha got sick, and this was the only job I could find that paid enough and gave me flexible hours so I could take care of her. But Mr. Alexander, I've discovered something important about your heart medication. The chemical compound isn't bad, it just needs a small modification to make it safe. I've run the calculations dozens of times. With a simple adjustment to the molecular structure, your medication could actually save lives instead of endangering them." Benjamin felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. "You really think you can fix the formula?" Jerome nodded confidently. "I'm certain I can. But I need access to a real laboratory and research equipment. That's why I've been hoping to talk to you for weeks, but I never had the courage until tonight." Benjamin made a decision that would change everything. "Jerome, I want to offer you a job as our head of research and development. I know it sounds crazy, but if you really can fix our medication, you could save thousands of lives, including your sister's." Jerome's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Alexander, are you serious? You would trust me with something that important?" Benjamin put his hand on Jerome's shoulder. You just saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. Your sister is sick because of my company's mistake, yet you still chose to help me. That tells me more about your character than any resume ever could. Besides, traditional thinking got us into this mess. Maybe we need someone with fresh eyes and a different perspective to get us out of it. Jerome was quiet for a long moment, then looked up with determination. If you're willing to give me a chance, I promise I'll work harder than anyone has ever worked. I'll find a way to make your medication safe and effective, but the road ahead would not be easy. The next morning, Benjamin called an emergency meeting with his board of directors to announce his decision to hire Jerome. The boardroom erupted in chaos. "Benjamin, you can't be serious," shouted board member Victoria Sterling. "You want to put a janitor in charge of our research department. What will our investors think? What will the FDA think?" Benjamin stood firm. "The FDA will think we're finally taking patient safety seriously. This young man has more insight into our medications problems than our entire research team combined." Another board member, Robert Hayes, slammed his fist on the table. "This is corporate suicide. You're destroying what's left of our reputation by promoting someone with no experience in pharmaceutical research." Benjamin's voice grew cold. "No experience? Jerome has a biochemistry degree from one of the best universities in the country. He's been analyzing our medication for months and has already identified the solution. Meanwhile, our highly paid research team with decades of experience created this mess in the first place." The board meeting lasted 4 hours, with heated arguments about liability, public relations, and corporate governance. Several board members threatened to resign if Benjamin went through with his plan. "Let them go," Benjamin told his assistant afterward. "Anyone who cares more about appearances than saving lives doesn't belong in this company." But the challenges were just beginning. News of Benjamin's decision to promote a janitor head of research leaked to the media, creating a firestorm of controversy. Financial news networks ran stories questioning Benjamin's mental stability and leadership abilities. Stock prices plummeted as investors lost confidence in the company's direction. Pharmaceutical industry experts called the move unprecedented and potentially disastrous. "Alexander has clearly lost his mind," said Dr. Margaret Foster, an industry analyst, on live television. "You don't put someone with no research experience in charge of developing life-saving medications. This is exactly the kind of reckless decision-making that got TechMed into trouble in the first place." Jerome faced his own battles as he tried to gain acceptance from the research team. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, the former head of research who had been demoted, made it clear she resented working under someone she viewed as unqualified. "I have 20 years of experience in pharmaceutical research," she told Jerome on his first day. "I'm not taking orders from someone who was emptying trash cans last week," other researchers whispered behind Jerome's back, questioning every decision he made and waiting for him to fail. The tension in the laboratory was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jerome knew he had to prove himself quickly, but the weight of expectations was crushing. He was carrying the hopes of his dying sister, the desperate families of other patients, and Benjamin's faith in his abilities. Every night, he went home to his small apartment and wondered if he had made a terrible mistake by accepting this impossible challenge. Meanwhile, Benjamin was fighting battles on multiple fronts. His ex-wife Catherine used the media attention to demand a larger divorce settlement, claiming his erratic behavior proved he was hiding assets. "My husband has clearly had some kind of mental breakdown," she told reporters outside the courthouse. "First he destroys his company with a dangerous medication, then he promotes the janitor to run the research department. I fear for the safety of our children if they're around him." The custody battle became front-page news, with tabloids running headlines like, "CEO's midlife crisis puts kids at risk," and "From riches to rags, the Benjamin Alexander meltdown." Benjamin's parents, who had always been proud of their successful son, now avoided him at family gatherings. His father, retired Judge William Alexander, called him in tears. "Son, what have you done? Your mother can't even show her face at the country club anymore. People are saying you've lost your mind. Maybe you should step down as CEO and get some help." The pressure was enormous, but Benjamin refused to give up on Jerome or abandon his belief that they could fix the medication and save lives. He spent his own money to upgrade the research laboratory with state-of-the-art equipment, even as his personal finances crumbled under legal fees and business losses. He mortgaged his mansion and sold his yacht to fund Jerome's research, knowing that if they failed, he would lose everything. The stress began taking a physical toll on Benjamin. He lost 30 pounds, developed insomnia, and started taking blood pressure medication. His doctor warned him that the stress could cause a heart attack, but Benjamin pushed forward. "I can't quit now," he told his physician. "Too many lives depend on getting this right." He found himself working alongside Jerome in the laboratory until midnight every night, learning about molecular chemistry and drug development in ways he never imagined as a business executive. Jerome's breakthrough came after 6 months of failures and setbacks. He had tested hundreds of molecular variations, each one bringing disappointment and doubt. The research team was losing faith, board members were calling for Benjamin's resignation, and Cachet's condition was worsening in the hospital. But Jerome never stopped believing in the solution he had envisioned. On a cold December night, working alone in the laboratory while snow fell outside, Jerome finally found the answer. The key was not just modifying one part of the medication's chemical structure, but creating an entirely new delivery system that would allow the heart medicine to work gradually instead of all at once. This would eliminate the dangerous side effects while making the medication even more effective than the original version. When Jerome ran the computer simulations and saw the results, he fell to his knees and cried tears of joy and relief. Benjamin was at home trying to sleep when Jerome called him at 2 in the morning. "Mr. Alexander, I did it. I found the solution. The new medication will be safe and more effective than anything currently on the market." Benjamin raced to the laboratory in his pajamas and bathrobe, not caring how ridiculous he looked. When he saw the test results, he hugged Jerome so tight he lifted him off the ground. "You brilliant, amazing man," Benjamin shouted. "You actually did it." But Jerome's expression was serious despite his joy. "Mr. Alexander, we still have months of testing ahead of us. We need to prove this works in laboratory studies, then animal trials, then human clinical trials. The FDA won't approve anything without extensive safety data. And even if everything goes perfectly, it will be at least a year before patients can receive the new medication. I just hope Keisha can wait that long." The next phase of their journey tested both men in ways they never expected. The laboratory studies went perfectly, confirming that Jerome's new medication was both safe and effective. But the animal trials revealed unexpected complications that required further modifications to the formula. Each setback felt like a personal failure to Jerome, who was watching his sister grow weaker every day. Benjamin spent countless hours encouraging his young research director, reminding him that scientific breakthroughs take time and that every great discovery faces obstacles. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times before he perfected the light bulb, Benjamin told Jerome during one particularly difficult period. The difference between success and failure isn't avoiding mistakes, it's learning from them and never giving up. These conversations deepened their friendship and mutual respect, transforming their relationship from employer-employee to something more like father and son. The human clinical trials began exactly 1 year after that fateful night in the parking garage. Keisha was among the first patients to receive Jerome's new medication, and the results were nothing short of miraculous. Within 2 weeks, her heart function improved dramatically. Within a month, she was strong enough to go home from the hospital. Other patients in the trial showed similar remarkable improvements. With none of the dangerous side effects that had plagued the original medication, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the cardiologist overseeing Kaisha's care, called Jerome personally to share the good news. "In 30 years of medicine, I've never seen such dramatic improvement in pediatric heart patients," she told him. "Your sister is going to live a completely normal life. What you've created isn't just a medication. It's a miracle." Jerome broke down crying in Benjamin's office when he got the call, overwhelmed with gratitude that his baby sister would survive and thrive. The FDA approval process moved faster than anyone expected, as regulators recognized both the medication's potential to save lives and TechMed's commitment to patient safety under Benjamin's leadership. The agency praised the company's transparency throughout the development process and held up Jerome's work as a model for pharmaceutical research. When the approval was announced, financial markets responded with enthusiasm. TechMed's stock price soared to all-time highs as investors realized they owned shares in a company with a revolutionary new heart medication. But Benjamin's greatest satisfaction came from reading letters from patients and families whose lives had been saved by Jerome's breakthrough. A grandfather from Ohio wrote, "Thanks to your medication, I'll be able to walk my granddaughter down the aisle at her wedding." A mother from California sent a photo of her son playing soccer, something doctors said would never be possible before he received the new treatment. The day the FDA approved Jerome's medication was one of the happiest of Benjamin's life, but not for the reasons people might expect. Yes, it meant his company would survive and even thrive. But more importantly, it meant that thousands of people would live healthier lives. At the approval celebration, Benjamin stood before his employees, investors, and members of the media. 18 months ago, TechMed Industries made a terrible mistake that hurt innocent people. We could have hidden behind lawyers and insurance companies, but instead, we chose a different path. We chose to face our mistakes honestly and work tirelessly to fix them. The hero of this story isn't me or any other executive. The hero is Jerome Washington, a man who saved my life in more ways than one. Jerome could have let anger and resentment consume him when his sister was hurt by our medication. Instead, he chose hope, hard work, and forgiveness. Jerome took the microphone with tears in his eyes. 18 months ago, I was a janitor working nights to pay for my sister's medical care. I was angry, scared, and felt powerless to help the person I loved most. But I learned something important that night in the parking garage. Sometimes the people we think have all the power are actually just as scared and lost as we are. Mr. Alexander wasn't my enemy. He was just a man who made a mistake and desperately wanted to fix it. When we choose to see each other as human beings instead of enemies, amazing things can happen. My sister is healthy now. Thousands of other patients will benefit from our new medication. And I have a career I never dreamed possible. But the most important thing I learned is that hope and hard work can overcome any obstacle if we're willing to work together. The story of Benjamin and Jerome spread across the country, inspiring others to look beyond surface appearances and social barriers. TechMed Industries became a model for corporate responsibility, and Jerome's success story motivated other companies to seek out talented individuals in unexpected places. Benjamin and Jerome became close friends, with Benjamin serving as best man at Jerome's wedding and Jerome becoming godfather to Benjamin's children after he remarried. His new wife Sarah was a nurse who had worked with heart patients and understood the importance of what Benjamin and Jerome had accomplished together. She brought stability and love back into Benjamin's life, and together they created a family foundation dedicated to providing scholarships for promising students from underserved communities who wanted to pursue careers in science and medicine. Kaisha grew up healthy and strong, eventually becoming a doctor herself, inspired by the men who saved her life through their unlikely partnership. She specialized in pediatric cardiology, dedicating her career to helping children with heart conditions like the one she had overcome. At her medical school graduation, she gave a speech that brought the entire audience to tears. When I was 8 years old, I was dying from a heart condition that no medication could safely treat. But my big brother Jerome and his friend Mr. Alexander refused to give up on me. They worked day and night for over a year to create a medication that saved my life and the lives of thousands of other patients. Today, as I become a doctor, I promise to carry on their legacy of never giving up on anyone. No matter how hopeless the situation might seem, the heart medication they developed together has now helped over 2 million patients worldwide. And Jerome has led the development of several other breakthrough treatments for conditions ranging from diabetes to cancer. Years later, when Benjamin was asked about the most important lesson he learned from that terrible night in the parking garage, he always gave the same answer. I learned that sometimes the person who can save you is the last person you'd expect. I also learned that our worst moments can become our greatest opportunities if we're willing to listen, learn, and change. Jerome didn't just save my life that night, he saved my soul. He showed me that true leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about being humble enough to accept help from anyone who offers it, regardless of their job title or background. Jerome, now the Chief Scientific Officer of TechMed Industries and one of the most respected researchers in the pharmaceutical industry, often speaks to young people about the importance of perseverance and believing in themselves. Don't let anyone tell you that your current job defines your potential, he tells them. I was a janitor who became a scientist, but the most important thing I ever did was choose compassion over anger when I had every reason to be bitter. Sometimes saving someone else is the first step to saving yourself. The parking garage where it all began has been converted into a memorial garden for patients who have been helped by TechMed's medications. A plaque near the entrance reads, "In memory of second chances, unexpected friendships, and the power of choosing hope over hate." Sometimes the most important words you'll ever hear come from someone you never expected to listen to. Benjamin and Jerome visit the garden every year on the anniversary of that stormy night, often bringing their families to remember how a moment of crisis became the foundation for a lifetime of purpose. Their story continues to inspire people around the world, proving that redemption is possible for anyone willing to face their mistakes, that brilliance can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the person who saves your life is someone you never took the time to really see. In a world often divided by race, class, and circumstance, their friendship stands as a testament to what becomes possible when we choose to see each other as human beings worthy of dignity, respect, and second chances. And so, as the memorial garden's young maples rose each year and their roots threaded through the old concrete like quiet vows, the story kept moving sideways through lives they would never meet, forward through choices that seemed small at first, and then proved to be hinge moments. Because a year after the plaque went up, Jerome and Benjamin stood before a congressional subcommittee not as apologists or heroes, but as practitioners, describing in unvarnished detail the design controls and open audit pipelines that now governed every molecule TechMed touched. They admitted the night they had failed and the morning they had begun again. And a senator who had lost a brother to bad medicine tightened his jaw and told them to keep going. And they did, formalizing an independent patient safety guild with budgetary veto power over any launch, embedding patient families on review boards, giving whistleblowers a protected hotline to a third-party ethics firm that reported to the guild, not to the CEO. Investors balked, pundits pouted, but the markets learned that trust is also a currency and that transparency compounds. And 5 years later, other companies copied the model not from altruism, but because the data showed a drop in post-market surprises and a rise in long-horizon value. Meanwhile, Kaisha finished a fellowship in pediatric electrophysiology and volunteered for rotations in clinics that didn't have enough scopes or clean linens, hauling 2-wheeled suitcases of donated patches and portable monitors through airports at midnight, writing protocols for families who measured time not in quarters or fiscal years, but in fevers and breaths. She called her brother from a hostel stairwell in Recife to say she had just watched a girl run across a courtyard that yesterday was a ward. And Jerome sat at his kitchen table with his hands on his head and forgot to breathe for a beat. Then opened his laptop and approved a plan that would ship low-cost formulations under a new access license to any Ministry of Health that signed the Open Data Reciprocity Pledge. Benjamin pushed the board to accept pricing that sounded like a misprint to analysts, then did something quieter that no one measured. He met, one by one, with the families whose rage had once filled his trash can, who had sat across a courtroom from him or hidden in a van with a wrench in the rain. He listened longer than he spoke, and when words ran out, he offered the only reparations that felt honest time, care, and a commitment that the company would tell the truth, even when it hurt. Years after the arrests, when two of the men who had tampered with his brakes completed a restorative justice program and a judge offered to expunge their records, Benjamin wrote letters in support and attended the hearing. After the docket cleared, the three of them walked the memorial garden together in an awkward, barefoot sort of forgiveness, the way people wade into cold water slowly, with sharp intakes of breath, not because it is easy, but because the shoreline has nothing left to teach. TechMed's labs changed too, not just in protocols but in posture, after Jerome endowed the Washington Lab for Translational Chemistry at Howard, a pipeline formed that did not feel like charity but reciprocity, 2 summer residencies that paid fairly, internships that built real projects instead of fetching coffee, sabbaticals for senior scientists to teach at community colleges, and then bring back new questions that rattled old certainties. On Wednesday nights, Jerome hosted an open colloquium in a glass-walled conference room where he insisted on the kind of rules that feel soft and turn out to be steel. Credit travels to the edges. Acronyms get translated out loud. No one defends an idea until someone else can explain it back clearly. The room filled with a taxonomy of shoes, steel-toed boots, heels, sneakers polished and scuffed because the door stayed propped open, and a janitor named Ray paused with a dust mop and asked if the calcium channels might behave differently in hypoxic tissue. And a postdoc scribbled the thought on the whiteboard, and the trial protocol shifted by a millimeter that later meant a mile. Benjamin, for his part, learned a slower power. He told his executive team that the new strategic plan was 2 pages long on purpose, and that if a decision could not be defended at a school cafeteria table with a parent who worked a night shift, it didn't survive the agenda. He canceled the glossy offsite at the desert resort and flew everyone, staggered over weekends to respect family time, to the clinic where Kaisha worked, the one with murals of giant lungs and paper kites shaped like atria. He stood beside a nurse named Alma while she explained the new dispensing protocol in Spanish and English to a grandmother who had brought a tin of butter, cookies she could not afford to be generous with. And later he told the CFO that he finally understood gross versus net in a new way. Because money is loud, but outcomes have a gravity that keeps pulling on you long after the applause fades, and he wanted the company's P&L to read like a ledger of promises kept. On the 10th anniversary of the storm, they held a small ceremony in the garden with no microphones and no media advisories. Kaisha read a poem she said she found in her coat pocket from a winter ago, though everyone recognized her handwriting and the wind flipped the pages. So she read it out of order and no one minded. Afterward, the kids ran between the benches and the adults drank paper cups of coffee that steamed like fog in the cool air. And Sarah slipped a hand into Benjamin's and said their eldest had asked, very seriously, if trees could remember faces. He said he hoped so, because then the maples would know who to shade kindly. The next week, a documentary crew asked for interviews, and they declined, sending instead a packet of open-source SOPs and a list of small, unglamorous changes any lab could make by Monday. The requests kept coming anyway, the book deals, the speaker bureaus, the endorsement offers, and every once in a while, Jerome would say yes to a public talk if it meant the Q&A could be a working session with students, if the honorarium could buy chemistry kits for a school where the goggles were shared and cracked. In one such auditorium, he watched a sixth grader raise her hand and ask how you stay kind when there's so much to fix. He said you don't wait until after the fixing to practice kindness. That kindness is not a medal you wear at the end, but the tool you reach for first, like a flashlight in the rain. In a different room years later, he gave a talk titled Humility as Infrastructure, arguing that the best way to avoid catastrophe was to design for listening, to make it easier to be wrong fast and right soon. A venture capitalist on the front row frowned at the lack of hockey stick charts until Jerome showed a curve of adverse events bending toward zero across 5 product families and said, softly, "This is our growth." When Benjamin finally retired quietly, with a letter that fit on a single sheet and a party that looked suspiciously like a potluck, he accepted a half-time appointment to teach a course on decision-making under regret. His students argued cases that did not resolve into clean virtues, then walked with him through the memorial garden, where he asked them the same 2 questions every semester. Who did we not invite into this decision, and what would it take to invite them now? TechMed's next CEO, a pharmacist turned operator who had started as a night shift compounder in Omaha, took the role with a promise to keep the door open and the phones answered. On her second day, she overruled a marketing brief that described patients as consumers and sent it back with a sticky note that said, "People," underlined twice. And in this steady, unflashy way, the culture hardened around good habits. There were still bad days recalls caught in time, trials that failed honestly, headlines that twisted, yet the company did not break because it had learned how to be porous without being weak, how to let information flow through without dissolving its sense of why. In a corner office that used to intimidate him, Jerome kept a photograph of a silver BMW in a downpour taped inside a cabinet door, a private talisman he checked like a pilot touches a rivet. Some nights, when the building was mostly dark and the cleaners' carts whispered down the hall, he would step into the corridor just to hear the familiar rhythm of after hours. He liked knowing that somewhere a person who could save his life might be sweeping under a bench, and that if they met, his job was to be the kind of leader who could hear their thunder through the storm. And if this story found you in a season like that, wet keys in your shaking hand, a plan that feels like flight when it's actually a cliff, then take this as your parking garage voice. Stop, listen, ask who you haven't seen yet, and let their seeing become your map. Tell one truth today that costs you something. Write a thank you that names exactly what mattered. Put a chair beside your table for the person who would never assume they were invited. And if you need a reminder later, come back to this garden in your mind where second chances grow like ordinary shade, where anger can be a bridge instead of a bomb, where a janitor and a CEO taught each other, and then all of us how to step into the same storm and walk out. Not dry, but together. If this journey moved you, share it with someone who's standing in the rain. And if you want more stories where everyday people change the weather, go ahead and like this, subscribe for the next chapter, and drop a comment about the moment you decided to turn back from the car. You never know whose brakes you might be saving.